Hi everyone and welcome to the Allplane podcast, where we talk with the movers and shakers that are redefining the future of commercial aviation. As usual, before we start, let me remind you once more that all previous episodes of this podcast, as well as many other aviation stories, are available on the Allplane website. That's Allplane.tv, ALLPLANE.tv. Our guest today is Jenny Kavanagh, Chief Strategy Officer at Cranfield Aerospace Solutions. Now, if the name Cranfield rings a bell, this is possibly because it is not the first time that here on this podcast we've got a guest that is connected to Cranfield. A few months ago we had here Keith Mason, who heads the Center for Air Transport Management at Cranfield University, which is one of the top academic institutions in the world, to learn about the aeronautical trade. But I must say that while they share name and roots with Cranfield University, Cranfield Aerospace Solutions is actually a business that is separate from the university. In fact, it was a spin-off from Cranfield University, but that happened about 20 years ago, and they have been an independent business since then. During most of these years, the bread and butter for Cranfield Aerospace Solutions were projects involving the modification, certification, or design of aircraft. But with sustainability taking an increasingly central role in aviation, Cranfield Aerospace Solutions has switched its attention to this emerging and rather promising segment of the industry. So in our conversation today, we talk with Jenny about the way Cranfield Aerospace Solutions has fully embraced the quest for sustainable flight and has managed to become a central player in the UK's efforts to become a green aviation powerhouse. Cranfield Aerospace Solutions is cooperating very closely with institutions such as the Aerospace Technology Institute, ATI, which is a British government body that promotes and funds projects in sustainable aviation. Cranfield Aerospace Solutions has also recently merged with Britten-Norman, a British manufacturer of small regional aircraft, in order to develop a new generation of hydrogen-powered aircraft. And it is also involved in Project Fresson, together with multiple other partners that are also aiming to develop hydrogen aviation in the UK. So, quite a lot going on, but it is best if, without further ado, we hear it all directly from Jenny. Hello, Jenny. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Mikhail. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for joining us today here on the podcast. Let me just introduce you in a couple of lines. You are the Chief Strategy Officer of Cranfield Aerospace Solutions, which is a UK-based organization that does very interesting things in the field of aerospace innovation and sustainability. We're going to talk about that more in detail. Before that, like every other guest, I would ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your background and how you got into the field of aviation.
Okay, yeah, so Jenny Kavanagh, Chief Strategy Officer at Cranfield Aerospace Solutions. I've been in the aerospace industry for 18 years now. To be honest, I fell into it. I was in a previous industry, a food production industry, actually. I felt like a change of role and career. And I was always fascinated with aerospace and aircraft. So I thought, why not? I'll give that a go. So I saw a job for a program manager at a company called BE Aerospace, who's part of Rockwell Collins now, and went for it and never looked back. So that's how I ended up in aviation. I joined Cranfield Aerospace 6 years ago as head of airborne systems, which at the time we were pretty much purely a design consultancy at that point. And we were doing a lot of very interesting engineering projects for the world's largest aerospace OEMs. So we worked with Airbus and Boeing and Raytheon, Leonardo, etc., who all came to us to do quite difficult, complex engineering projects for them, which kind of leads into, who Cranfield Aerospace Solutions are and why we're doing what we're doing. So I'm now a Chief Strategy Officer. I changed my role during COVID, actually, to be more outward facing. So I am essentially responsible for everything that's forward looking and outward facing to do with our project. I'm essentially responsible for the strategic exploitation of the technology that we're developing, which encompasses everything from business development, sales, government relations, industry relations, as well as the strategic roadmap and the ecosystem around the aircraft, so the infrastructure, airports, things like that.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting organization. I would like to talk a bit more in detail about Cranfield Aerospace Solutions, because the very first thing I would like to clarify is that you are separate from Cranfield University, which is a renowned university in the UK for aerospace studies. And we actually had one of the key members of faculty here in the podcast as well. The origins of Cranfield Aerospace Solutions are at the university, but you are currently, well, you've been for already, I think, more than 20 years. You are a separate entity. You're a private for-profit business, isn't it?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, originally the company was actually a spin out from Cranfield University, but not in the traditional sense. It wasn't an IP spin out. It was a capability spin out. So there was a group of very well informed and clever people where it was actually separated from the university in the late 1990s, 1997, something like that, where they ring fenced that people and created an approved design organization around that capability. And that's what we've been doing essentially for the past 30 years. This little company has been designing and certifying complex modifications to aircraft, as well as designing subscale and full-scale aircraft ground and flight demonstrators. And it was that the business was doing when I joined it 6 years ago. We're also a 145 maintenance organisation and a 21G production organisation. So we have a whole suite of aerospace approvals and have had for many years. About 5 years ago, we realized that even though that's a very exciting thing to do and it creates a great deal of experience and knowledge within the business, it's very difficult to grow a business when you're at the mercy of discretionary spend of large OEMs. And when I joined, we didn't have more than 6 or 7 months of revenue projection, and you can't create permanent positions around that. You can't keep growing your business. So we decided to change our strategy. It was right at the beginning of when the aerospace was starting to look towards sustainability seriously. And so we thought, right, we'll use our capabilities and our approvals to do something for ourselves, and we'll transition ourselves from a design consultancy business to a product business. And that's when we decided to take the Britten-Norman Islander and to retrofit it with zero emissions technology. And just to finish this off, you're right, we are a completely separate commercial entity. We have been since we were started, but up until March 2021, I think it was 2021. I'll have to check that. But anyway, up until recently, edit that
around
more.
that time, yeah.
Up until recently, we were wholly owned by Cranfield University.
Okay.
Even though we were a separate commercial entity, we were our own profit maker and all that. But when we went for our Series A investment to fund our hydrogen product, that's when Cranfield University is now a minority shareholder, and we are the majority owned is by the rest of our investors.
Okay. Yeah, actually, you brought up a point that I wanted to ask you a bit later, but we'll mention it now. I think you closed a funding round recently of about a bit more than 14 million pounds, British pounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's in connection to the project that you currently have underway to retrofit and then at a later stage create a hydrogen-powered aircraft for sub-regional operations, yeah?
That's correct, yeah.
So you've been spearheading in the UK all this push towards sustainable aviation, and you've been involved in a number of different programs to basically make of the UK one of the main centers globally for sustainable aviation. What can you tell us now about this project? You're involved in something called Project Fresson. You recently merged with a small British aerospace aircraft manufacturer called Britten-Norman, which makes this kind of, I don't know, a bit funny looking aircraft with that are operated in some regional networks. For example, in Channel Islands, there are a few, I think, in Scotland. Like it's called the Islander as the main product, but you plan to make them hydrogen powered in the future. Are there any other projects as well that you are involved at the moment? You have also close links with ATI, which is the organization in the UK that basically funds and promotes all these projects in aerospace innovation and sustainability. So what can you tell us now about the different projects that you currently have underway and what they are all about?
Okay, so let's unpick that a little bit. So first of all, I'll start with what Cranfield Aerospace Solutions is trying to achieve, what our ambition is. So we are an aircraft company. We're not a propulsion company. So what that means is that in future, we aim to be an airframer, a designer and manufacturer of clean sheet, zero carbon aircraft. That's our ultimate ambition. But we know, because of the experience that we have with the regulator, that you don't take to the regulator a clean sheet aircraft with a brand new propulsion system using fuel that they don't understand. You'll be there for decades. And we're a small company. We need to get to market relatively quickly. So which is why we chose to retrofit that. And obviously it suited our capabilities very well. The Islander, the Britten-Norman Islander, we chose very, very carefully. So you're right, it is a strange...
Yeah, it has an unusual look, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, it's been around for many years. And the reason
Yeah.
it's been around for many years is because it is such a good aircraft.
Yeah.
It's what's called an ultra-stall. So it has very short takeoff and landing capabilities. It's also very robust. So it can land on beaches, grass, gravel, ice, pretty much anywhere that looks remotely like a runway, it'll land there. So it's great in remote areas. The clue is in the name. A lot of its operations are around and within islands. So it's a short hop aircraft. So even though it can actually fly 1,200 kilometers, the vast majority of its operations are very short hops. I think the shortest is up in Orkney, which is 2.7 minutes.
Yeah, that's the shortest scheduled route in the world, I think, with commercial service. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So we chose the aircraft very carefully because once you apply this, let's face it, inherently heavier technology, at least it is at the moment, once you apply it to an airframe, you're going to reduce its performance. We did not want to mess with the takeoff and landing, the short takeoff and landing capability, because that's why a lot of Islander operators have it in the first place, because no other aircraft is capable of doing what it can. So we're maintaining that short takeoff performance, but it does mean that the range is significantly reduced. And we knew this would be the case right from the beginning, which is why we chose an aircraft whose operations, therefore, don't fight against the restrictions of the technology at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I guess many of the use cases, for many of the use cases, the range is not so important, I guess. If you're operating in a inter-island service in the Channel Islands or Orkney to mainland Scotland, stuff like that, it's relatively short distances that you are trying to cover here. Your strategy is basically you are betting on hydrogen fuel cell. Is that right? So it's going to be basically a fuel cell. It's going to run electric engines, but it's going to be fed by hydrogen. I think in the initial stage, it's going to be in a gas form. I don't know if you also have plans to switch to liquid hydrogen in the future as well.
Yeah. So like I said before, we're an aircraft company. So we're not technology evangelists. We actually started Project Fresson as hybrid electric. So no hydrogen to be seen. But once we'd been through the detailed calculations, we realized that just wasn't going to work. It was going to end up too complex and too heavy because the energy density of batteries is really, really low. And so we switched to hydrogen because that was the technology that worked best for the aircraft. And although we're not technology evangelists, we do believe that hydrogen is really the only thing that's going to be able to decarbonize aviation because of its high energy density. Yes, it does have challenges when it comes to its storage. It's either very, very heavy pressurized tanks in gaseous form, or it's quite a large volume, 4 times the volume of kerosene for liquid hydrogen. But it is the fuel of the future, without a doubt. When it comes to gaseous or liquid storage, you're right, the Islander will have gaseous storage on it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is from a getting the technology to market point of view, gaseous is less complex. It doesn't mean it's easy. It still has a lot of challenges on it, but it's much less complex than liquid because you don't have to deal with the cryogenics. But also, when you are retrofitting an aircraft or indeed doing any kind of aircraft design, every bit of technology has to buy its way onto the platform. And what I mean by that is it's ultimate, the benefit of the technology has to be worth the challenges. And on an aircraft this small and this simple and at this price point, introducing cryogenics just didn't buy itself onto the platform. So that's why we're using gaseous hydrogen. And yes, it's fuel cells. Again, every technology has to buy itself onto the platform. And with an aircraft that its mission is to fly low and slowly, you don't need to combust the hydrogen. You don't need a turbine engine. This aircraft does have a turbine variant, but the vast majority of it are piston engines. So we chose the fuel cells. Now, that's not to say when we move forward in our roadmap, which is to get to larger aircraft, phase 2 being longer range, larger aircraft, we will definitely move to liquid hydrogen at that stage because we need the extra range and the extra payload. Probably still fuel cells at that point. But when we get to phase 3 and 4, which is looking at small and larger clean sheet regional aircraft, we will do the assessment between fuel cells and combustion hydrogen at that point, because it would depend on the mission of the aircraft. Turbines like to be driven high and fast. Fuel cells prefer to be lower and slower. So depending on what the aircraft is going to do, to some extent will dictate what technology is chosen for the platform as well.
Yeah, on your website you have outlined different time frames for this development. I think the first stage is actually doing the retrofit and the existing airframe, the Britten-Norman Islander. Then the idea is to scale it up, still with a fuel cell, and then to go for a clean sheet design. We're talking for a clean sheet design, we're talking about mid-2030s, something like that?
Yeah, early 2030. That's right, yeah.
About 10 years from now. Yeah. Okay. And Project Fresson, what else can you tell me about it? Because I think that's a project that there's a number of different partners and organizations involved in that, yeah? Tell us a bit more about it, because I think that's also a project that has been supported by the Aerospace Technology Institute, ATI, that I mentioned earlier. What's the time frame of this project and how it relates to this specific airframe project that you are also conducting at the moment? I don't know if it's the same thing or there are two parallel things that have many points of contact.
So Project Fresson is the Aerospace Technology Institute project that we kicked this whole thing off with. So thanks to the ATI, who gave us the first amount of grant funding to kick all of this off, that was to develop the flying demonstrator, which will fly next year, which is called Project Fresson. That's sort of the one and the same thing. And you're right, we do have a number of technology partners on that. Britten-Norman is one of them. We knew from the start that we needed to collaborate with the OEM, and I'll get to the merger in a minute. We also have Ricardo, who are helping us develop the fuel cell system. Reaction Engines, who is another great UK company, who's actually, they're known as a space company, a space access company with their Sabre engine. But what ultimately they are one of the world leading thermal management companies. And the thing is with fuel cells is you need a world beating thermal management solution, or you're not going to have a commercially viable product. And that's what they bring to this. And then we have Evolito, who we announced recently, who are providing the electric motor or the electric power unit, including inverters and controllers and this is all for the demonstrator. It's TBD yet who the partners will be to go for the production, but obviously being on the demonstrator is a good start, right? So that's Project Fresson, and that ends in the technology demonstrator, which will fly next year.
Where are you testing that aircraft?
At Cranfield.
At Cranfield, okay.
Yeah. The great thing about Cranfield University is it's the only university, I think, on the planet, or at least in Europe, with its own airport.
Yeah, true.
So,
and its own.
Very handy.
I don't know do they have their own fleet as well, aircraft? I don't remember now. I think
they have
on static. I don't know if they fly. Are they airworthy or not? I know they have some aircraft, but I don't remember if they are airworthy or not. They just have it there.
That's a static aircraft that'll never fly again. But they also do have a Saab 340 that they recently commissioned. That actually Cranfield Aerospace did the modification to turn it into a flying classroom for them. So they do have a number of aircraft that they use for their academia and their research.
Let's say the project goes as expected. What are the funding requirements? I mean, you raised capital recently. I guess you count on Britten-Norman's industrial capacity as well. I don't know how big that is because it's a small OEM after all. So what are your industrial plans? Let's assume that the whole development stage goes well. What next?
So that's a good question. It probably brings us to the merger. A wonderful segue into that. So we have just launched our Series B. So I don't think I can go into how much that is, but we've just launched our Series B, which essentially is to get us to the flight demonstrator and beyond. And we need to get to market with that. So, and that Series B funding is intended to be in the Cranfield and Britten-Norman merged entity. So there are a number of reasons why Cranfield and Britten-Norman collectively decided to merge. Obviously, we are bringing to the table pioneering zero emissions technology. We have chosen their aircraft because it's a great platform to start with. And they bring to the table the fact that they're the OEM and they have production facilities, right? So we needed as a company to ensure the ramp up of the production of those aircraft, which required some investment, so some of the Series B will be contributing to that as well. But also in terms of merging, the reason why do that instead of a collaboration is because delivering this sort of technology to market needs a real team effort, and it has to mean that every employee and every department of those companies are pointed in the same direction. And you can go so far with collaboration, but unless you're both going for the same thing, really, you're always going to have slightly conflicting business interests. So we decided to merge it all together and to deliver it as one aircraft, zero emissions aircraft product. So with that will come industrial ramp up. I mean, that's one of the whole points of doing it, really.
Do you have already a name for this future aircraft? Have you been talking to potential customers, airlines, operators, leasers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we currently have 81, letters of intent for 81 hydrogen aircraft, modification kits, but that'll be transferred into aircraft once we merge. So we have 3 from Skybus, who are a UK existing Islander operator. We have 20 from Monty, who are a sub-regional lessor with 20 options, so that's 14 in total. And they are great to bring to the table because they offer the financing solution for these new aircraft in future, which is going to be absolutely key. We also have 15 from an airline startup in Germany called Avia Aero, who has seen the opportunity that this new technology creates with its reduced operating costs in creating new routes for zero emission short hop aircraft. So we're working very closely with them, and that's a particularly exciting partnership. And then we have Air New Zealand, who are completely other side of the scale, who want to change their fleet to hydrogen over time, but they realise they've got a lot to learn about hydrogen, as anybody else who's working in this space. And they see actually the deployment of a small aircraft like ours as a good way to learn about that and to drive the infrastructure and standards and regulations activities, not just conversations. And so we're working closely with them at the moment, and we've got letters of intent from them. But on top of that, obviously, we're talking to a whole load of other islander operators and non-islander operators across the globe about their interest in this technology.
Are you planning to get involved as well in the, let's say, the supply chain of hydrogen? Because, for example, we had here on the podcast Val Miftachov of Zero Avia a few weeks ago, and he explained how they are getting involved in part because of need, because there's no infrastructure at the moment in many places to handle this hydrogen. I don't know if that's an area of the business that you are also getting involved, or you are talking to partners basically to address this issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the role that I have, is the ecosystem part of it, because it's not just the aircraft technology. You know, you talk to an operator in the Caribbean, the first question they say is, "Oh, this is brilliant. Where do I get the hydrogen from?" Which is the reason why Val and his team went down the road that they have as well. So we're not intending on getting so vertically integrated as those guys, but we are having quite a few conversations with hydrogen producers and infrastructure partners, because we realize that, you know, we do need to bring solutions to the table. Having said that, we're also very conscious that there isn't a cookie cutter approach to this. Every airport and operator is different. Their business models will differ depending on their appetite for investment, their appetite to become a fuel producer, because that, essentially, if they're going to put electrolyzer on their airport, they are becoming a fuel producer, which comes with it, you know, liabilities and commercial undertakings that they probably haven't dealt with before. So some of them have the appetite to do that, some of them don't. Some of them want it just delivered to them and the problem taken away. But actually, the vast majority of them really want to understand it, and they see it as a real opportunity to become energy independent, especially those ones that are shipping in kerosene at the moment. You know, they think, oh, hang on, well, we could get renewables into this and get a whole end to end, and we're energy secure. So there's quite a few of these operators and airports who are looking at it as a business model of their own, and what we're bringing to that is our experience and our knowledge from our partners as well into how they might do that. But we're also talking to partners where we can help deliver that solution if that's what they want. Not every operator or airport wants it just delivered on a plate. They want to work it out themselves. So we're there to help. So it's not quite as a clear-cut strategy as Zero Avia, because we do recognise that there's a lot of flexibility you have to have, and everyone's trying to get their head around what it is that they want, and we're there to help figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Have you quantified how big is this market globally? How many aircraft in this particular category are potentially an addressable market on a global level?
So we're going through some market studies at the moment, because one of the things that that isn't in existence really is a plethora of market appraisals on this sector of aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the studies have happened on all the large ones because there are obvious reasons, right? That's where all the money is.
Yeah, it's pretty niche. I mean, this specific market.
It is, but also it's niche because over the last few decades it's been horrendously underinvested, because the economics of kerosene means that 9 to 19 seat operations are generally very difficult to make money on.
Yeah.
And so the planes have got bigger and bigger and bigger to improve the cost per seat economics and all that kind of stuff. When you actually are reducing your operating costs by 40, 50%, suddenly those economics change. And there was a thriving sub-regional industry before, and actually there's still a demand for it. And some of the studies that we're now seeing are projecting, with these new zero emissions aircraft, pardon me, and reduced operating costs, we would see a massive resurgence in that sub-regional space. So there may be, I think there's about 3,000 to 3,500 little 6 to 19 seat aircraft flying around at the moment. That could become 10, 15,000 by 2035. So, it's niche to large companies, but to a small company like us, that's a cracking market to be part of. Mm-hmm. And there's not that much competition either. Yeah. And the incumbents, in terms of the aircraft that are flying around, are all quite old, and therefore the operating economics are not that difficult to compete with. So we're quite happy to be starting in this space, because that's where the technology is. The technology is just not ready for large aircraft right now. It might be to fly them around, but to get them into commercial service with the reliability that technology needs, it's just not there yet. So we think this sub-regional space is where it's all going to start, and we think there's a very nice market there for the taking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just as we're seeing in other segments of the, let's say, the clean aviation space, quite a few new operators that want to create new markets. So address not so much the people that are flying today, but people that will fly in the future, because it will be made possible by the more advantageous economics of the new technology. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting opportunity there. So, yes. So you have this time frame, let's say, over the next decade, retrofit, then the next stages, scale up, clean sheet design. Where can people follow you, keep track of all the progress you are making with this program? Is there any specific website, social media channels that you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have our own website, www.cranfieldaerospace.com. We're also on LinkedIn. Look us up on Twitter. Yeah, we're always posting about what we're doing. More than, please follow us, because this is the future. We're true pioneers. So it's I hope it's very interesting to watch what we're doing. 2026, that's when we want to get this hydrogen aircraft into service. So it's not far away.
Indeed, it's not far away, and it's definitely very, very interesting. So, well, thank you so much. Wishing you all the best with these projects you have underway, and thanks again for your time.
Not a problem. Lovely to speak to you, Mikhail.
Thank you.
Before you go, and if you like this podcast, a quick reminder that it would be absolutely great if you could please give it a rating on Apple, Spotify, or whichever platform you're using, or recommend it to a friend or whomever might be interested. Thank you very much, and see you soon.